Thank you very much, Greg. It is really good to see you all this evening. A couple of questions just to start us off. How many of you are actually use Power BI every day? Most of you, right? Or a lot, not every day. How many of you write code at some point? You know how to write some sort of code of some kind, okay? How many of you pretty much never write code? Pretty much never? That's cool, that's fine. This will still be useful to you. How many of you wish that it was a little easier? That's the golden question, right? That's the golden question. And I hope to be able to answer that question for you. So this is me. I'm David BERGLIN. You probably want to take a picture of this link because I think you're going to want to download the code that I'm going to show you. So I recommend just recording that real quick. And then we're here at Power BI User Group. This is such a great group. This is such a great group. Yeah, and this is my second time here, and honestly, I probably won't be around a lot because I have prior commitments every Wednesday. But you folks represent something very special to me, and it's why I'm excited to be here. It's because we're IT people, and the IT people are special because we share. And everything I learned from some other IT guy who put it on the internet. And everything someone's going to learn from this, and it's going to be because some IT guy put it on the internet. So we're a special bunch, and I appreciate all of you because you are the community that makes us what we are, and so that's cool. Today we're going to be looking at a lot of different softwares and a lot of different processes, and I just wanted to put these up here. You don't have to remember all this, but we're going to be looking at Power BI Desktop. The solution I have for you really doesn't pertain to the PowerBI.com at all. But we're also going to be using PowerShell. And there's a version of PowerShell called ISE that's particularly useful in this case. And then I like to use Visual Studio a lot, Management Studio if you're a SQL person. GitHub is for source control, and then I like WinMerge for file comparison. So those are the kind of things we're going to be looking at today. And the reason why is because the parable of the cube. So if you're like me, you spent a good chunk of your life looking at this and saying, that's impossible. I don't know how people do it. I'm not going to solve this for you today, okay? I'm sure somebody here could, but the parable of the cube is that when you look at this Rubik's Cube, it looks complex and it looks random. It looks complex and it looks random. But it's actually neither of those because it's really not that complex and there's really nothing random about it. Because in a Rubik's Cube, you can really only do one thing, and that's you can turn it like that. That's as much as you can do. Now, you can do it again, or you can do it in this way or in that way, but all you can do is turn it once. And so you can turn it right or left, so that's 2 things. And then there's like 3 axes, so that's 6 things, or 2 times 6, whatever. There's some probability here. But like you're still only dealing with a few variations. And then if you do it a number of times, you end up with something that looks complex and random, but it's neither. And what you need is to be able to look at that and discover the patterns. And once you know the patterns, it's easy. It's easy. Once you know the patterns, it's easy. And so I'm going to show you how I found the patterns in Power BI. And that's why we're here today. All right, so we're going to be talking about the visibility in 2 types of visibility into Power BI reports. And so the first kind of visibility has to do with file comparison, and this really applies to source control, versioning of a report. And then the second type of visibility that I want to show you is about DAX dependencies. Not just DAX dependencies, it's actually more than just DAX, but dependencies in the Power BI report. And how do you find out if I change this, what's going to break? So we're going to be doing that. And so as a high level, I'm just going to be showing you some things about how it's done, how it's been scripted, and then how you can use it. And finally, if we have some time at the end, I might show you some of how it works. So let's go ahead and dive in here. We are going to start off by looking at this report. These reports came off of a Microsoft website, and they were produced by a company called Obviance. And so I wanted to say thank you to them because I'm not very good at Power BI. The fact is I've been doing Power BI less than a year, maybe 6 or 7 months. And I really don't know my way around Power BI that much because I'm a software developer. I've been developing software for 9 years, so I can write code, but Power BI is kind of new to me. And to me, it looks like that complex Rubik's Cube. So these folks put together this really nice demo, and it's a good thing because it would have taken me a year just to make this file, right? And so now I've got this cool file I can play with, and so thank you to them for that. This is what we're going to be looking at, and I want to start off by just playing with this file a bit and showing you what I'm doing with it. So, oops, excuse me. The Zoom thing is really awesome. Thank you for that, Radu. It's the Windows key and the plus. Yeah, Windows key and plus. So I'm going to try to zoom as much as I can for your own benefit. But here we have this is the Power BI file that we're actually looking at, this PBIX file right there. And one of the things that you may or may not know about most Microsoft files is that you can kind of hack with them a little bit. And so we're just going to do that for starters. I'm going to make a copy of that and paste it. And this is something that's been around for a while. It's nothing new, but I'm just going to change the extension of this to a zip file. Just manually change it to a zip file. And when I change it, it wants me to confirm. Am I sure? Of course I'm sure, because I'm going to hack it. And then I want to then I'm going to go ahead and hit the extract all. This is the normal process for any zip file, right? And it's going to extract it and stick it in a folder. And now we can see something that's going on inside a PBIX file. See, if you were to open the PBIX file any other way, it's just going to show you binary stuff or Unicode stuff or gobbledygook, right? And you can't make any sense of it. But if you unzip it, you can now see there's a bunch of files there and even a folder. You're like, where did that come from? Well, this is the inner structure of a PBIX file. And a similar thing can be done with Word documents, Excel documents, et cetera. And so it gives you some insight about what's going on under the hood. Well, inside these various files, you're going to probably find two things. It's either going to be a JSON string or an XML string that carries data about what's going on in the file. As we look at it, we're going to notice there's two big files here. One, this data model file is pretty large by comparison. And you know what the data model is, right? Because you're all Power BI folks. In this report folder, there's this other file called a layout file, and it's also larger than the others. These two files are the ones I was trying to focus on. I didn't even look at the other. Good stuff there, but I haven't even delved into that yet. And so I wanted to find out what's going on, what's in all this big file. Well, I opened that particular file right here, and this is what's in it. Not much to see here. It starts off, you can tell that that's JSON. And the JSON is a mile long. It literally is a mile. It is just enormous. And I think, what am I going to do with this JSON thing? I can't, I don't want to be scrolling for 10 minutes till my fingers are tired from scrolling on my wheel mouse. I need to figure out what's going on in here. So I opened it in Visual Studio so I could just format it, because Visual Studio formats JSON, and this is what I got. This is pretty good. You can see that that's not the right one, sorry. It's this one. It's not incredibly large, but it's still got some size to it. But I noticed another thing that that started to worry me a little bit, and that is here. If you're not familiar with JSON, let me just explain this really quick. JSON expresses objects, right? Like XML would. And so this part that's on the left here, this is an object. But when we get to the right, we have a quote. Then we have more JSON, except this JSON has an escape character. And what that means is that they have a JSON thing, and they converted it into text. So that means that in order for me to figure out what's in that JSON, I've got to convert that to from text into JSON. And that means if I was going to do this manually, what that would mean is I'd select the whole thing, copy it, put it into some other software, convert it, and then want to paste it back into the same spot. That would be ridiculous. So that was at that moment I realized I need PowerShell, which is one of my favorite tools. PowerShell is a scripting language that Microsoft got, and it is just awesome. And what I have to share with you today is a PowerShell script that does all this for us. But what it basically does is goes through all of this structure, this enormous structure, and it finds all these things that are text and converts them to real objects so that the objects can be expressed in JSON. Now, maybe that doesn't make a lot of sense to you if you're not a coder or if you haven't played with JSON before. But essentially what it's doing is taking a complex bit of data and laying it out in a tree view structure that is a little bit more human readable. That matters because of source control. That matters because of source control. If you have a version of a file and you're trying to figure out what changed, there's all these file comparison softwares out there. They all do a great job. I'm using GitHub in this example. And what it will do is compare line by line by line. Well, if your line is a mile long, comparing it is not much use. Of course it's different. But if you can get it to be a tall list of lines where you can break it out into the bits of data that really matter, you can all of a sudden discover what changed. So say you have some friends and they're working with you on a Power BI report. And they're working on some stuff. So-and-so, let's see, and Bob, he changed the report and they got hungry for lunch, so they went out for tacos. I wish I had a taco right now, but I don't think anyone's going to jump up and get me one. That's okay. While he's gone to lunch, the boss comes in and says, hey, I need this report done. And you say, well, I can't just publish it because Bob changed it. I don't know what he did. If I published it, who knows what's going to happen? Well, wouldn't it be nice to find out what Bob did? Yeah, it'd be really nice. A similar situation happened to me at BBSI where I work, is that we had an old Power BI report, and it had been modified but not published. And somebody asked, hey, can we go back to the old version, but then change this one thing? And I thought, how in the world am I supposed to go back to the old version? I don't even know what's in that thing. It's just this blob of data, right? Well, I actually did know what was in that thing because I used my script and I was able to do it. I was able to go back, say 6 to 8 months on a file, see what's different, see what I needed, what I wanted to keep, what I didn't need to keep, and revert it and make sure that the bugs that got fixed still got fixed, but the other stuff that wasn't supposed to be there got stripped out, and I was able to produce this report. And I was able to do it in a day because it wasn't that hard with the script. So that's what we're trying to accomplish here. All right. I've now got lost in my presentation. I need a moment to gather my thoughts. Those are my thoughts. I'm gathering them. I can't read that fast enough. Okay, so essentially what the PowerShell script is doing is file manipulation. It's creating a zip file, unzipping it, it's turning it into JSON, it's fixing the JSON, and then it's replacing it as a file. I think you're ready to see the script. Let's just go ahead and run it. Let's see what it does. I'm opening up PowerShell ISE, and my script is right there. This is exactly the one that is on the download GitHub that I showed you earlier. And this is what the PowerShell looks like. This is a lot of code. And if you were to look at the line numbers, you can see it's a lot of code. It's 1,300 lines of code. You know, when I started off, it was just this cute little script. And then they grow so fast, don't they? They just, you know, next thing you know, they're all grown up. That's how my script has been. Anyways, I'm going to go ahead and fire this guy off. And I'm going to, yeah, let's go ahead and look at it. So what I wanted to do, first of all, was just explain what the script is doing, because I knew I wanted to share this with you all. And I knew that you weren't going to want to just run some script and be like, oh, do whatever you want on my computer. Who cares, right? So I gave an overview of what the script is actually going to do. This script is going to copy a Power BI desktop file, treat it like a zip file, unzip it, pull data into memory from that layout file. Then it's going to delete the stuff it copied, so it cleans up after itself. convert the nested JSON into PowerShell objects. That's where it's cleaning up that JSON. And then it's going to, this is where it's going to do some really cool stuff. It's going to extract a list of measures, columns, and other data, metadata from that object that it found. Then it's going to start looking on your system to see what processes are running and which Power BI files are open right now. It's going to find the one that matches the file you selected. Then it's going to query the SSAS tabular model that's running inside that file. And it's going to pull out of that the list of all your tables and columns and measures and measure definitions and properties of those measures. And then it's going to put that back into that whole JSON blob thing and output it. And it's going to output it 3 ways because you might want it a particular way for one use and another way for another. So I have at least 3 ways of outputting the data so it's useful in different ways. And that's kind of what it's doing here. So the first thing it's going to do, I have a choice. You can hit C to cancel, which why would we ever cancel? I never do. And I'm going to hit P for a file picker. This is just a thing I wrote in the script, right? So because I didn't want to keep finding and pasting stuff. So I added the letter P so I could find that particular file. I'm going to hit enter. Now it's going to ask me what kind of output do you want once I'm done. And again, I told you there were 3 kinds. That's the SQL script, the tab, and the PBIX. There's also some times where you just want to see what's inside my measures. There's another time where you might want to see detailed logs if there's errors happening. I need that as a developer. Hopefully you never need that. And you can also do a combination of these. So I'm going to start with just option J, which is producing a JSON file. And this is the whole process going. I like to add logs to my code so I can see what's happening. There, it's done. And it did all the things that I showed you manually, but it did it for me in script. And it did some things I didn't show you, and it outputted this file. So since we were in this folder using this file, this is the file it just created at 7:15 p.m., which is right now. So that file is open so that you can see it right here. Sorry, there. Now, if we look at this file, it is enormous. It's 7,000 lines. So it's just a lot of data. There's a lot of data, but it has gone through and found all this information that was inside that file. And I'm now able to figure out what Bob did because he's out eating tacos. He doesn't care about me. He's hungry. And I need to know what's in that file because I want to keep my job and my boss needs the report. So now I can figure out what's going on. So let's actually do that. Let's do that. Here inside Visual Studio, I'm using source control. I love Visual Studio. It's my favorite tool of all time. It's integrated with GitHub. So I'm able to look at a file and look at versions of that file. So let me make sure I get the right one. This is the file that we've been looking at. And I'm going to go ahead. How many of you use versioning? Source control of any kind? And how many of you aren't really sure what that is or you don't use it? Anyone? Okay, good. That's okay. So it just keeps track of files over time. It stores a copy of each file as it changes. So I can look at the history of that file right here. Now, what do we have? Oh, well, first of all, that's in the way. But dude, did you put that there? Just kidding. So, okay, Bob committed this file right before he left to get tacos. So now I'm like, well, what's in that file? I want to find out. It's not even the most recent in this case, but I'm going to right-click that file and just open it. And it's going to open Power BI just like normal. Just like normal. Now, this step is a little bit like you can't automate everything, but this is not that bad. It's going to open this file, and we do have to wait for it. Sorry. But all I really need to do is I need to have the file running because in order for it to look at the data in that file. I'll take this moment to explain that a little bit. I showed you there were 2 files when you unzipped it that were really big. One of them is the data file. Why you can't look in that directly? Because it's encrypted. And you're probably glad it's encrypted, because do you want your real data to be scrapable by anybody? I mean, right, just kidding. But truth be told, there could be sensitive data in there, so it's encrypted, so you can't just pull it out of that file. But if the file's running, you can connect to it and read it, and that's what we're about to do. So this file is now running. If you look at the name of it, it's this gobbledygook thing. That's the name that the source control system gave it. And that's what I need to do is I need it to run, but then I need to save it. So I'm going to do a save as and put it right next to the other place. And you know what? We're just going to call it tacos, okay? Call it tacos. Now it's running and it's saved. Those are the two things I had to do. It's running and it's saved. Now I'm going to fire up my script again, execute one more time. I need to go find that file, so I could type in the path to the file manually. But I like my file picker, so there's my tacos file. I hit enter. I want JSON again. Count to 3. All right. Now I have in this folder, it created a JSON file of the tacos. That was, now I'm really close to being able to figure out what Bob did, but I got to do the same thing again for the next file. So I'm going to go back to the history, go to the file before it, and open it just like before, and just do the same process again. Only this time I'm going to name the file differently, obviously. Okay. Don't you ever just stare at those dots as they go by and get like totally mesmerized? And I do that all the time. Okay. So we're going to name this before tacos. Save the file. Now it's open. It's running. Sorry, it's open and running, and it's saved. So run my script again. Starts with B. J for JSON. And now it's done. Okay, so now that that's been finished, I have my tacos file, and I have the file from before they left for tacos, and I can right-click that and use my favorite comparison software, which in this case is WinMerge. There's a lot of good ones out there. And here, I can now see the difference between these two files and what changed. Well, what's at the very top is a timestamp. Now that timestamp doesn't exist there natively in Power BI. I put that in there through my script because I kind of wanted to have a record of when the script ran. Because this JSON file, it might end up in source control by itself, right? You could save the PBIX file in source control, but why not save this file in source control? Who knows? Either way, I wanted to know when it would run. So I know there's going to be a difference there every single time. But if I go down a little bit later, I can see that, well, there's this thing that says height and width and X and Y. And what does that kind of sound like to you? Okay, I happen to know because I have a split personality and I am Bob. But what Bob did before he went for tacos was he clicked on a visual and dragged it over a little bit because he wanted it closer to the title of something. And so all he did was relocate it. And this helped me know, oh, that's all you did? You just moved that thing? Except that's not all he did, Bob. Excuse me. So I can see that is what changed. And I can find another change here. Now, this is kind of interesting. Any guess what this is? Yeah, this is a measure. This is a measure. Now, if I was to scroll up a bunch, there would be a thing that says measures, and there would be square brackets that indicate an array of measures. And this is just inside of there. But you can kind of know that there's a name for this measure, and it's GM percentage. You can see it right there. And what they did, you can see the measure was modified. That's a normal thing that Power BI does. It keeps track of when stuff was modified. That's kind of handy to know. But also you can see that the expression of the measure got changed. And what did he do? Well, if you were going to divide gross margin by total revenue, would you use a division operator? No. And that's what Bob did. Shame on Bob, right? Because this was coded correctly. I know because that's how Jen coded stuff at BBSI, and I get to look at her code all the time. Thank you, Jen. Jen's one of my favorite people because I get to look at her code all the time, and it's good. It's awesome. It's totally awesome. And it always works, except the stuff that I do, well, you know. Anyways, I can tell by this that Bob made a change, and I'd be like, why would he have done this? And I go, oh, that's right. He was showing me the wrong way to do it. He accidentally saved his changes and then left for tacos. Shame on Bob. Well, I now know I can just throw out the changes Bob made And I can go with that file and I know what needs to be fixed because there's no other differences in this. Well, except the name, okay? This is a GUID. It's going to be different every time Power BI is running, generates a new GUID. So that's going to be different all the time too. And I've now discovered what was different over time. That could have been over a week or over a month. Who knows? Now, fair warning, if you don't change your source, if you don't save to source control often, you're going to have files that are radically different. And there's going to be so many changes that you're going to get lost. And it's just going to be just as hard as doing it some other way, right? But this still can be done well, potentially. And this can answer some of these difficult questions, potentially. And this gives us visibility into what changed, either in the visuals or in the measures. That's number one. The second thing I wanted to show you is about dependencies. Dependencies. I love spaghetti code, which is why I write spaghetti code every day. Yeah.
So I think it's amazing, of course, because it's always been like a binary file that you're saving up and you could never see it. So this is really cool. They are sort of talking a lot of Microsoft about doing source control. You know, do you think that that's like going to come down the pike? Do you have any thoughts on that?
Do I have thoughts about it? Yes. First of all, I am a total fan of Microsoft. They have I use almost exclusively Microsoft's technologies in my coding. I'm a .NET developer first and a lot of other things after that. But so I'm not the kind of person who's going to be like, oh, those people, right? I've heard those people. That's not me. That being said, I really know nothing about what they are or planning to do. I only know what I needed to do this year. So I built this solution kind of to hack my own way to answer my own problems. And I'm kind of hoping it inspires somebody somewhere. And if it does, that'd be great. As far as, so what are they going to do? It's an obvious need that all of us have. I'm sure it's on their radar. They're smart folks. I'm sure they'll figure out something that's better than this. Nevertheless, I needed something today. So that's how I arrived at this. But I didn't just need source control because, as I was saying a moment ago, I like spaghetti code, which is why I write it every day. But trying to figure out what's going on in someone else's spaghetti code, so to speak, can be very difficult. We have a large, complex, well-written report. Thank you, Jen. But nevertheless, it's just a lot of information. It's hard to follow. I'm not always that smart, and I needed help. So I needed to figure out, we were tasked with this thing. We had two reports. They were really similar. They got merged together into one report, but they both had a date table, only the date tables were named differently. So then a bunch of stuff broke, and you had to realize, like, the stuff that I copied over, I've got to fix the names of these dates so they match the naming convention of those dates, so they all work together off the same thing. That was one example where this date, what are all the places it touches, right? How many places is the date used in Power BI? Holy cow. Okay, so I'm going to try to solve that problem for you also. Yeah. All right, I don't think we want to use the taco file anymore, so I should use the C to cancel. Look at that, I used it. I'm going to fire that up again and use my picker, get back to the one I'm used to using, which is this sample. And now it says, okay, I have a choice. I can have SQL, I can use tab delimited tables, JSON, I could look at measure expressions. You know, I'm distractible. Let's just look at some measure expressions really quick. That output on the screen, every measure and what the contents of those measures are, including some that I altered myself because I wanted to have a multi-line measure and I wanted it to have comments in it. And I wrote comments because I love my fellow developers. I wrote that for Jen because she wrote comments in the stuff I use at the office. Thank you, Jen. You're still my hero. Okay. So there I have a list of measures. I know you can get measures other ways, list of measures, right? But I wanted a faster way to do it. So I scripted it. Okay, sorry. Let's do that again. Oh, here's the thing. I'm not going to hit the P because I'm like lazy as can be. I don't want to navigate to that file every time. So the script will remember the last file you used, and you can just hit enter and it'll use it. So that's kind of handy. And then instead of you looking at measures this time, let's just look at T. T is for tab delimited table. And there we go. On the screen, it says the tabbed data will now be copied to your clipboard and also displayed on the screen. There's a reason why I copied it to the clipboard, and that is in PowerShell, you don't always preserve the tab character. Also, in PowerShell, because it's a command line, if you reach the end of the line, it wraps. And if it wraps and you're pasting it into Excel, that's not good, right? So I just told the script to put it on your clipboard. And so without hitting Control-C, that's a lot of stuff. I'm just going to paste it right there. And what we have are all of our dependencies. Now, this might not make sense to you at first. And actually, I never do it this way anymore. But I want you to be able to see data in a way that's easy to understand. Because that's how we all start, right? Measures exist in a table. And, oh, wait a second. I am going to just zoom it. That's going to be a lot easier. Measures exist in a table, so we're going to start off with all the tables. Each measure has a name. And you put those two together, and you get the address. This is an address that I'm actually constructing in the code. So I tried to use a convention that I'm pretty sure that's the standard convention. You tell me. I'm kind of new to this. This is a column. So in the BU table, there's a BU key column, and it's a column, it's not a measure. And it has a dependency of nothing. That's actually kind of helpful sometimes to know. As we scroll down a little bit, we get past all the columns and we find some measures. This is a fact table. This is the name of the measure and its address has the full name there. It has a dependency of this table and this guy, which is a column. So that measure references this column. Later on, there's a measure that references another measure, which might reference another measure, which might reference another measure. Well, I put it in a Excel format because sometimes you just want to look at stuff simple. And this was as simple as I could think of. But I don't use it because I'm a coder. I like to use SQL. Where did my mouse go? Yeah, I think my battery is actually running out on my mouse at the worst time. That is great. I love it. Okay, so here we have SQL. We're going to talk about SQL a little bit, and I'm going to show you some really killer stuff. But before I do that, I wanted to point out some things that maybe you didn't know, and I learned that this actually very recently. If you are in SQL Server Management Studio, you can connect to databases, which is what I'm used to doing. But you can also connect to analysis services. We use an analysis service at our company for our reporting because it has great role security. You might not use this very often, but actually use it every single day because every open file in Power BI is actually running an analysis tabular server in the memory of that Power BI file. So there is a one running already right here in this file. And so even if you're even if you don't think you're using SSAS, you actually are. Let's go back and look at how the script exposed this. I'm going to run it one more time so we can look at the logs that came out. It copied the file, it unzipped the file, it did all these things. I told you about that. It read the JSON. It evaluated the PBIX file. Now this is where it gets interesting. It used the title of the file, because if you hover over it, it tells you the title. It tells you the title to find the correct one, and it gets the process out of all the Windows processes that are running. And then it looks at all the child processes of that and says, find which one of these are actually tabular models, and then tell me from that, what's the port? Because every tabular model has a port. You can take that port and you can connect to it. And that's what I already did. So excuse me, in this example, I connected to a tabular analysis service, and what I actually entered was, where is it? It doesn't, oh, I scrolled down. You see the port up there, 54526? That's the port number, and you can connect to it. My SQL Server Management Studio is actually connected to my Power BI file and interacting with the data that's in that file, if I wanted to. I don't actually do this way, but you can, and that's what's impressive to me. So then the PowerShell script looks at, this is how it uses it to read the data out of that file if it's open, and that's pretty neato. But that also is a little distracting because we're looking at the SQL side of things and understanding these dependencies. So let's back up a few steps and just get back to, I want to look at SQL. I'm going to hit S for SQL, which is also the default because I use it the most. And if you don't like that as the default, too bad for you because I wrote the code. Ha ha. All right. So here it's going to do everything like before, but this time it says the SQL script is now going to be on your clipboard instead of the tab delimited stuff. And I hit enter, and there's a bunch of SQL script, and I can come over, oops, into here. I'm going to connect to my database and just paste that in. Now, if you're going to write SQL that's 3,000 lines long and give it to the general public, what's the very first thing you should write? A delete statement. Because, you know, why not live dangerously? So you need to evaluate this code when you run it, okay? I think you can trust me, but you shouldn't think you could trust me, okay? Because this might be doing dangerous things. I know it's not, but you should double check for yourself. What I'm doing here is I have a table of dependencies. I want to get rid of the old data and put in the new data. So I just delete all the old stuff and add the new stuff. One thing that's cool for me about this, I keep track of the name of the file so that it deletes only the data that pertains to a particular file. So if you have some data laying around from an older file, you don't have to like redo it every single time. And what it's doing is adding this data into the database and just adding to this simple table. This table is actually not incredibly complex. It's more or less the same as what you saw there in Excel. So let me just show you what the table looks like. This is not the most complex code you've ever seen if you're a coder, right? The table just has source, child, and a few parameters of each, and that's about it. So when I execute this script, like normal, it's going to show me that it deleted 217 rows at the beginning, and then it inserted that many. It also expected that because the script knows what it was trying to do. And so I can know that it worked. This is where it gets, for me, super geeky, super fun. Along with, once the data is in the database, the scripts that are on the GitHub come with these three views. And I'm just going to do, let's see, so I do parents or children. I think I'm going to do children. I'm just going to select some of these. So again, we have the topmost parent. In this case, it's this column. That's not a very good example. Well, we have parent types and there's measures. Let's just skip to visuals because that's more useful, don't you think? Find out what visual, if I have a visual in Power BI, what are all the measures and columns that are affected into creating that one visual? Let's skip to that. So if you don't know how to code SQL, that's okay. I have a solution for you, but I'm just going to put parent type is a visual so I can see some of those right away. So here I've got various visuals And this one is called, there's an area chart on the team scorecard tab in this file. That's pretty helpful. I don't know what the name of that area chart is. I might know what the name of it is if I were to give it a custom name. I don't know what that name yet is, but it is a visual, it is a team scorecard, which is a card. So dude, did you put that in the way again? And then it has a dependency for this other thing, which is a measure. That's the name of the measure, and that's the file it came out of. And then here's some interesting stuff here. I wrote this for the non-coders in the room. The title of this column is Child Scripts, and there's a column next to it called Parent Scripts. So the SQL that I wrote actually writes other SQL that you can copy paste. So you don't have to know how to write it all yourself. I'm going to take that child script and just paste it up here. And let's first of all zoom out. You can see what I pasted. It pasted this section of text, if you're able to see that. And what that is one, a script to get all my child dependencies, a script to get all the parents who depend on me, or there's going to be duplications like those dates. They're going to be duplicate, right? So this gets distinct or rather unique values of either children or parents. And then sometimes if you just want to look at the raw thing yourself, fine. But if I'm trying to research this particular thing, I can just execute that script and see what the children are. And if I want to see who all the parents are, I can execute that script. That's kind of handy because you can copy paste it. And that's giving me some more information, but I don't even think that's the coolest part. And in order to show you that, I actually need to go find a better example. Oops. All right. Here I'm looking at a topmost parent, which is called the year-over-year, year-to-date General Motors growth. Sorry, guys. In the view, it gives the number of recursion. That means how many dependencies, how deep did those dependencies go? And so next to that, it has what I call the trail. And that will show you what those dependencies are. So I'm just going to paste that in. And you can see what the dependencies are. This file has that table, which has that measure. That measure depends on this measure. This measure depends on this one, which depends on this one, which depends on this one, and so forth, all the way down to the end. And you can see all of the dependencies just like that. Once you get familiar with the script, you can locate information very quickly. And so it goes both directions, because if you're looking at, I want to know all my children, it'll show you that trail of all your children. But you can use the other script and it'll show you the trail of all my parents. And by doing that, you can discover if I need to make an edit to this because Bob made a change, and if he messed it up, I'm gonna need to fix it. But am I sure I'm gonna fix it? Well, if I'm sure, then I need to be able to see what are all the visuals, what are all the tabs and displays where this shows up, and I can look at them to see if it's correct. And then I can also see, well, if this is right, I can compare the values from before and after and make sure I didn't break something and make it worse, or did I make it better, and so forth, right? All of those questions can be answered this way. All right. At this point, I think I've shown you the main features of the script. And I've been talking for about 45 minutes, which feels like a very long time. But there's some other bells and whistles that go on, and I will answer some questions in a little bit. I'm trying to think, though, I need to look at my notes here about stuff that really matters that I might want to talk to you about. Yeah, that's worth mentioning. Okay. Yeah, I think we can maybe wrap it up. What I wanted to talk about was just, okay, what is really affected here? Okay, if I make changes to the Power BI file, it's able to track drills, so I can see it not only tracks the visuals but also the drills. If you have a visual and you turn on the title, right, a title will appear. That title, it seems to me to be auto-generated. So I can't really figure out what that is because I'd have to kind of figure out what the logic is inside the app, and I couldn't do that. But if you give it your own title that you custom make, then those will appear in the script. So let me see if I can find a simple example of that. There's an example. This file has this column, which has a tree map, and the title on that tree map is total revenue by region. All right, I had to put that title in because in this example file, all the titles were auto-generated. I couldn't figure them out. But if you put in your own title, it'll show up on here, and that helps you find stuff, right? And so I recommend adding titles. Plus, I learned from my coworker who learned from Jen that if you need a title in something that doesn't support titles, what do? You change it to something that does support titles, you give it a title, then you change it back. And guess what's still in the JSON? The title. 3 cheers for JSON, right? So you can give titles to things that don't even support titles, like maybe a slicer or something. I don't know. I don't even know what does or doesn't support them. That's pretty cool. And so it supports various types of data, and it also, I include in this SQL also the DAX definitions, because I wanted to be able to see what the dependencies are, but also do a quick SQL thing and see what is actually written in the measure definition. So that's another little bell and whistle kind of thing that I added. And well, I guess that's it for now. So what my hope is with this is that I can give back to the community that built me the community built me as an IT professional by teaching me everything I know about IT. And I want to be able to give something back to the community so that they can be better and be awesome. You guys are already awesome, but maybe you'll just be a little bit more awesome. Well, it'll be like way too much awesomeness going around. And that's what my hope is. So you'll be able to download this. Please don't sue me if something goes wrong. Plus, the disclaimer says you're not allowed to, so just follow those rules and we'll be good.
We'll get your link up on the YouTube recording and all that. And
yeah,
up on the UG
that would be great. Yeah. So I guess it's a good time for questions. Who has a question?
Questions. I'm sure there's going to be a lot.
Have you thought about using Docker for some of this?
Docker sounds like a really intriguing idea. I have played with Docker a little bit. I'm actually not super familiar with it. So can you explain to me how you think it could really give an advantage?
So with Docker, one of the cool things is, let's say you have Python script, but in order to deploy that, let's say you're using desktop, this guy's using desktop, you have to deploy Python libraries into each desktop version. Where Docker, you can just push the libraries through without having to load it onto something else.
Yeah, that might be useful, but I don't think that's going to be a huge value in this case because this doesn't really use libraries. So other than Microsoft. So I'm assuming that everyone's on a Windows machine. And if so, that means you have the .NET framework involved. And I wrote the code so that it uses only what's on a Windows machine. So there's actually one section where the JSON, it's this enormous tree view of thousands and thousands of things. And it can be really ugly to look at. Microsoft almost always ships a DLL called newtonsoft.json. But that still is not part of the .NET framework yet. It will be in the next year's version, I think. In any case, I wrote into the script so that if it finds that DLL there, it'll use it. And if it doesn't, it'll do it the more ugly way. And there'll be a little note on the screen. And you'll read that and go, what's that about? And then you'll have to figure that out. But I wrote it specifically so it wouldn't have dependencies of things like that. So hopefully it could run on any environment.
Questions?
So I have a comment and then a question. The comment is when we were in Atlanta at the Business Applications Summit, I had a question for the Ask the Experts about version control. And they said that it is up on the Ideas Forum. One of the actual Microsoft guys put it up. You can find it on the Power BI Ideas Forum and upvote it because it is something that's on their radar, but they're they prioritize other work. So if you care about version control for the code and not just the zipped files, go find that. My question is, we've talked a lot about in the front-end visuals file, it has all the DAX for the measures. Is the DAX for the calculated columns coming into that too, so you can see all the dependencies when you're making calculated columns, or is that in the other file where the data model is?
Yeah, it might not use the correct term. So the question about whether the calculated columns are in there, I'm not exactly sure. And the reason is because at the office, the one I play with is really focused on an SSAS server. So I don't run this exact code. This is really for this community. So I have a separate piece of code that I use for that. And I don't think it distinguishes between columns and calculated columns. I think it lumps them together. But at the same time, sometimes in a Power BI report, the report sees them kind of the same in a way, right? So there's times where, like, if a visual says it depends on something, the visual doesn't necessarily know, is it a column, is it a measure? It's just, so in this case, I'm pretty sure I always labeled it as a measure. So there might not be a clear things, but they ought to show up at least on some level, I expect.
Anybody else?
You mentioned maybe I'm misquoting you, but you mentioned like the data sources were like encrypted or something. Could you expand on that a bit? Because what I'm trying to do is a similar project where I'm trying to find like all the dependencies across, like different servers and PBIX files and that kind of stuff. So is there any way to kind of see anything regarding like the query sources at all, or is it all hard to tell?
Well,
hard to tell?
Right, that's a great question. I didn't dive into it too much because I started and then I ran into a wall and I just went a different direction. So you can unzip those files and see the contents of it on your own and play around. What you'll find is that in that file, that's the data one, I'm pretty sure it has a little bit of JSON with some wrappers and some IDs that you can read. And then there's a middle section that's just almost the whole contents, and it looks like encryption to me. And I realized I wasn't gonna be able to figure that out, so I don't really know exactly what's in there. But what's nice about this is that because you can look at how the code works, it's not that complex, and it just loops over all the tables, loops over all the things. You'll be able to pull a lot of data out if you want to customize the script for your own needs. As far as the actual data sources, I don't remember exactly where they might be stored. Again, I've only played with this type of it a little bit. At my company, we have just one data source, so I didn't dive into that too deeply.